And now on the line is Cleary. Anne is the CEO of Aidlink. Anne, welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
And I've done a couple of interviews with your organisation over the years, but today is my first time to talk to you personally on radio, and this is my first interview in general with your organisation in over 2 years. I got in touch with you today to talk in particular about World Water Day 2022, which was held earlier this week, and to talk about your Walk for Water project. As this is my first interviews, which is in over 2 years, though, Anne, could you remind our listeners today on the FM, for those who don't know, about who Aidlink are and the work that you do every year?
Yeah, happy to. So Aidlink is a small international development organisation working mostly in Kenya and Uganda and a little bit in Ghana. And I think one of the things that makes us, I suppose, a little bit unique is our approach to our work. So we work with local organisations on the ground to try and assist them respond to the needs of local people. We've got a really strong focus on gender equality and inclusion, a really strong focus on girls' education in particular, not least because we work very much with communities from very rural and traditional backgrounds, nomadic pastoralists, particularly in Kenya, the Maasai and the Turkana and the Karamojong in northern Uganda. So we do a lot of work in primary schools, trying to ensure that all children are enrolled in school, but particularly trying to get girls, to enroll in school, to stay in school, to perform well in school, and to transition on to secondary school.
Okay, you mentioned local or other local organisations. You have a number of partner organisations, don't you?
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
So yes, that's right. And I think maybe one of the ways to explain that is, so we work particularly with the Girl Child Network in Kenya, with Voluntary Action for Development in Uganda and others. I think for us, one of the keys to be very close to communities, to respond very appropriately to their needs, to be really, really cost effective and responsive, is to work with local organisations. And one way maybe of describing them, it's almost like saying, well, in Ireland, the Peter McVerry Trust responds to the needs of homeless people in Ireland. They understand our culture, our language, the challenges facing those communities. And in the same way, we work with the Girl Child Network in Kenya because they understand the culture, the challenges, the network. And we stand with them. We support them in program design and management. Of course, we support them financially and in monitoring and evaluation. But we believe that it's by working together that we can have the greatest impact on the ground, particularly for women and girls.
Okay, we'll move on. I got in touch with you today because earlier this week, World Water Day 2022 was celebrated. I know you have a project. Could you tell me about World Water Day this year and your Walk for Water project?
Yes, indeed. So World Water Day is a big international day. It's a day that's recognised all over the world. Really, the UN designated it, and it was to kind of raise the attention on the challenges around water poverty. Aidlink, about 10 years ago, we decided that as part of our work, that we would try and engage young people in Ireland in the water and environment agenda. And the reason is for us that, as I've already said, we do a lot of work with girls and with the girl child and with women. And the challenge in rural communities for collecting water is always with the girl. It's a girl's job. It's a woman's job. And many of the communities we work with, children walk average about 6 kilometres a day to collect water. But in the current drought in Kenya, they're walking between 15 and 30 kilometres a day to collect water. So I'm just back from Kenya, where I had not been able to travel to for 2 years. And visited our partners and communities in Turkana in northern Kenya and in Kajiado down near the Tanzanian border, and met communities who have literally not seen rain in almost 3 years, where the ground is parched, where families are parched, where they've had to move house in search of water, move their animals in search of water, and it's had a really devastating impact on the community. So one of the things that Walk for Water does, the campaign in Ireland, is it's about mobilising young people in Ireland to learn more about water poverty and the real impact that it has on girls, the real impact it has on communities. And it gives them an opportunity, I think, one, to learn, and two, to take action, to walk in solidarity. So this year we've had 20 schools from around the country where their students have participated in a learning programme, but also have been walking for water. And this week, almost 2,000 young people in Ireland have walked between 3 and 6 kilometres, carrying water, sometimes in bottles, sometimes in watering cans, sometimes in buckets, to walk in solidarity with their peers and with young people in Africa. And I suppose it's just another example of where I would say where we're seeing young people just take on this leadership role, showing empathy, showing solidarity, trying to take action to bring attention to this really critical, at one level, most basic need, and then a really critical need. And so it's not always just about not having water to shower or not having water to water the plants. The impact on girls is, if you are walking in Kenya, if you are walking 6, 8, 10 kilometres a day for water, you're missing school. You don't do well in exams. These are the communities we work with in Turkana and Kajiado. They're communities where there is early marriage, and so families will say, well, look, she's not doing very well in school, so therefore there's no point in her staying in school, so we'll take her out and we'll marry her off because that's the only thing that she's worth doing. But we believe that if she does stay in school, if she gets the same access to teachers, to teaching and learning, and the same opportunity as boys, that they will do as well as boys. And therefore, water, as I say, is simply not just about drinking or washing or watering the plants. It's also about life opportunities, and particularly life opportunities for girls. So we're really delighted with the response this year. We know that in Ireland at the moment, we know that people are, really challenged and perplexed maybe by all of the challenges in the world, from what's happening in Ukraine today to climate change. But we're really heartened by the energy and the commitment shown by young people. Like, they have the capacity to take these things on, to show their concern and solidarity for others. And I think that augurs well for the future.
Okay, you mentioned on there that it hasn't rained in one of your countries for 3 years. Is that, would you blame that on climate change?
Absolutely, yes. I think that sometimes when we're sitting here in Ireland, climate change can sometimes feel like an academic thing that's about, other places. Standing in Turkana in northern Kenya, where they haven't seen rain. I mean, the sun is blasting down from the sky, 40 degrees heat. The ground is bare and barren. There is nothing to soak it up. There is nothing growing. There's no trees. There's no plants. And it feels like the heat is coming from the ground up as well as from the sky. And when we talk to people in Turkana, older people, they will tell us that, 20 years ago, a severe drought would happen about every 10 to 15 years. And then it reduced to 5. And now they're saying 2. But even at the moment, they're saying, it's bleeding in. I mean, normally they might see a bad dry spell, and then it would rain, and then they'd have maybe 2 years respite, and then it would rain again. And now we're into year 3, and it should be raining now. Rain should have started at the beginning of March, and there is no sign of rain. And these are people who are simply, on a daily basis, living on the front line of climate change. They are, and they have very little opportunity, I suppose, to respond against it. These are people who are, living still in very simple structures, mud and wattle houses. They are going to dry river beds. I mean, they're simply digging holes in dry river beds and going down 25, 30 meters to try and access groundwater under a dry river bed in order to access enough water for drinking. I mean, simply for drinking, which puts lots of other things at bay. So spending so much time in search of water means that you can't do other things. You can't go to school. You can't go to work. You can't engage in business or any other economic activity because the sole purpose every day is to find enough water. I met I suppose a middle-aged woman sitting in a queue at a borehole in Turkana, and I asked her, how far had she travelled, and she said, "I've had one sleepover, like a one sleep," which means that she got up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. She walked all day, she slept, and she walked all day again to get to the point. So she was now waiting her turn in a queue for water, and then it was going to take her those 2 days to get back. That's the impact of climate change on some of the poorest people in the world anyway. It's quite shocking to see. Their resilience is extraordinary, their determination is extraordinary, but it is really quite shocking just to see it come so rapidly, so very little time for people to recover. And I think the biggest issues in a place like Turkana at the moment is absolutely water, but secondly food, because now people can't grow anything. So most people that I met in the week running up to St. Patrick's weekend in northern Turkana are talking about, simply having one meal a day. They tend to be pastoralists, so they really like their animals, and they really like milk. They like camel's milk and goat's milk and all its variations. And most people I met had not had milk for over 6 months. And you can see it etched on their faces. You can see it on their bodies. People are hot. People are tired. Determined, yes, but they're really suffering. In Kenya alone, the government have declared an emergency, and there are 2.8 million people in need of food support. And what most people have said to me is simply asking me is to pray for rain. So quite dramatic.
Okay, I won't keep you much longer. And it's sad to hear what you're saying there. I know, like, occasionally we hear a lot, even in the international and national media, about the progressing over the last couple of decades and getting so many people internationally out of poverty. But like what you're saying there is, like, in the 2 countries that you work in, the situation as regards access to water, it's actually got worse over the last couple of decades, has it?
I think that we have seen extraordinary progress in the last couple of decades. I would absolutely concur with that thesis. I think the problem is the last couple of years. We know in Ireland that COVID has had a really hard impact on people, particularly poorer people, I would say. Rich people may have been, maybe this is a bit simplistic, but have been inconvenienced, where poorer people have really felt the pain. I think that one of our greatest concerns is that the progress that we made over the last 2 decades, much of it is being eroded. And that, I think, has been in a major part due to COVID and climate change. And the two things coming together. So children in schools in Kenya and Uganda, schools closed for 9 months in Kenya, for 2 full years in Uganda. Uganda schools only opened in January 2022, having been closed in March. So we're seeing massive losses for girls in particular. So girls who were, told to go home on the 18th of March 2020 because of COVID, many have not returned to school. Seen a 40% increase in teenage pregnancies. We've seen a much diminished return to school from teenagers, from teenage girls. And then the complications then of this prolonged drought. So COVID together with drought has, I think, has the potential to have really eroded some of the great progress that had been made in the previous 2 decades.
God, we could talk about this all day, but we haven't got the time to go through it all today. But just to speak about your Walk for Water project, I know it's an international project. Like I think it started by UNICEF, is it?
It's a major UN campaign.
Okay.
It's a global campaign. So the students in Ireland were, if you like, joined together in this major solidarity campaign with students from all over the world. And it is World Water Day is the 22nd of March. But for many of us, it is for the whole month of March that we, if you like, we talk more about water, we learn more about water, and we try to increase awareness and understanding, and then also try and increase our support to communities who are in dire need. But yes, this is part of a global solidarity campaign, and I think is critical in meeting just the really basic needs of some very ordinary and very lovely, girls and boys in East Africa. And as I say, we are really grateful to the schools and the communities that have stood with us in these last couple of weeks.
If I remember correctly, the project used to be called Walk for Water and Sanitation. There was a change, was there?
I not really, no. I mean, I think often we talk about water and sanitation together, because of course they do go hand in hand, and of course in schools it's very important for children to have access to water, but also to safe toilets, safe latrines, just for personal hygiene. So we often put hygiene, which requires water, and sanitation in the one sentence. I think many of us who are working, like a lot of the work of Aidlink, I mean, this year alone in Kenya we're working in 20 public primary schools. We're putting water into those 20 schools, putting toilets, very basic latrine toilets, but we're putting latrines into those 20 schools, hand washing facilities, which is a new addition for us. And this is, I suppose, to promote basic hand hygiene, of course, but also to try and protect children from COVID. So COVID clearly is very real still in Ireland and is real in Africa. So we often put the two things together. Water, hygiene and sanitation are a package. And when we work in school communities or when we work in communities, we often try to combine the two together. And when we do, we see much better results in terms of improved health, improved going to school. So people aren't sick as much, so they can go to school and they can go to work. And just generalize, better health and well-being and better results all around when we combine the two. The campaign itself, though, is simply called Walk for Water.
Okay, my first interviews with yourselves was with Claire Lynch back, I think it was 2014. I think it was.
Oh gosh, yes.
I think it was formerly called Walk for Water and Sanitation back then. But
yes.
I have an interest in sanitation internationally because I know there are billions of people around the world who openly defecate and haven't got access. So it's a huge issue. A lot of people are unaware of it in Ireland.
Huge.
Okay, and before you go, is there anything else you want to tell our listeners today on their FM about your work in Aidlink over the next year, leading us up to next March of next year?
Well, I think to say that while the month of March 2022 is about Walk for Water and heightening that campaign, that for the next 12 months we will continue to work with communities in Kenya and Uganda. We will continue to try and with our partners assist communities in accessing clean, safe water, assist in trying to increase the enrollment and retention. It's just key, this holding on to children in school, both boys and girls. And then also working with communities, I suppose around, sometimes just around changed practices in terms of cultural beliefs around the role and status of women, and and for us, all these things are integrated. You know, the access to basic hygiene and sanitation, water and sanitation, the access to school, and the right to learn, and the right to play, and the right to a childhood, and the right not to be married off at a very young age. And then also supporting communities in alternative livelihoods. And I think this is going to be a really critical issue, particularly in light of climate change, that people who have been, you know, pastoralist farmers, you know, looking after their animals or trying to grow things, if you are rain dependent and the rain is not falling, we have to try and explore other opportunities for livelihoods for these communities, which is something that we're trying to do. So even if some of our work is being highlighted, you know, once a year, we will continue to work with our partners. We will continue to work with communities. We will continue to work with boys and girls throughout the year. And we're very grateful for all the, you know, assistance and support from young people in Ireland and from communities all over Ireland who've been very supportive of our work.